Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I am super excited. This time, 6 o'clock, we are going to get started. This is a Christy Iwuchukwu's Brilliance TV show, what we do every Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is where we spotlight the defining moments and accomplishments of today's top business leaders, entrepreneurs, unique and most successful individuals. And listen, this is where you come in, because this show is for you and about you, and this show cannot exist without you. So I want you to be a part of this community. I want you to come and enjoy, bring your question. Every week, I bring different experts on different topics, so that these are the topics that we hear about. So I make it a point of duty to make sure that I bring this topic. So go ahead and be a part of this community and share the love to as many people as possible. And today, I am joined by my guest, my friend, that you really cannot wait, and I cannot wait for this interview. But before I get started, so who am I? My name is Christy Iwuchukwu, aka Lady Christy, CEO and founder of Chosen Path Global, helping you and aspiring women entrepreneurs who are looking to gain confidence to grow the business of your dreams. It's about speak up, speak out, and gain confidence. And I'm super excited. I also want to talk about what I have going on this week. Don't forget that on the 27th of this, to be a part of that telesummit as a speaker, whether you are an author, whether you are a speaker or a coach, or infopreneur, a marketer. This is a marketing platform for you. And we're going to leverage a lot of email, social media that I have partnered other businesses with. So I am looking forward to it, and I would love for you to be a part of it. Listen, what's today? You guys know what today is. And so today we recognize this is a happy birthday for Dr. Martin Luther King. And listen, no one can really forget about the legacy of this man. And without him, I don't know that I'll be here today. I don't know that I'll be doing what I do today. So I really want to take the time to honor him, to honor his legacy. Moving right on, I want to really bring my guest today, because we have a lot of juicy information, juicy topic, juicy conversation to talk about. So who's my guest today? My guest today is Vaun Jackson. He is coming to us from all the way from Georgia. Vaun Jackson is a relationship strategist, empowering couples and individuals to embrace a healthy and intimate relationship. Because healthy relationships account for the bulk of people's happiness, Vaun is passionate about providing remedies to alleviate relationship hiccups, so couples and individuals may thrive in their long-lasting relationships. So the next person I bring to the mic right now is my friend, Vaun Jackson. Vaun, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Christy. Good evening. I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well. You and I met in North Carolina, and we have been connecting ever since. Looking forward to the next conference with Dr. Ruben West, and I'm just so looking forward for that conference. So I appreciate you coming by. I don't take this lightly, because you could have been anywhere else, but you accepted my invitation to be here. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation. It truly is an honor. And just to echo your sentiments, before I go further, I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Martin Luther King for his dedication and his sacrifices, his great many sacrifices. I'm not too far from his birthplace in Atlanta. I'm right outside of Savannah. And I just want to say, may he rest in power right alongside the rest of our great ancestors.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So we're going to go right into the interview. You know, we're talking about remedies for relationship hiccups today. And I think relationship is something that we cannot get away with. With something that, for the most part, I believe is very crucial in our lives. Whether we're talking about gender to gender, whether we're talking about opposite relationships, whether we're talking about relatives, whether we're talking about work, relationship is a relationship, and it's very crucial in our lives. It can actually make or break us. But oftentimes it's an issue that we don't really want to talk about. We don't want to talk about it because it's one of those difficult conversations. And when you get into difficult conversation, people choose to stay in a safe place. They're staying in a safe place because you don't want confrontation with the other person. For the most part, it's safer to not say something, to not say anything at all, whether or not the relationship is going well. But I believe that there's a way that we can help have a crucial conversation and not be afraid to do so, just to rescue the relationship. And that's something that you really going to help us really look at and evaluate today. So I'm so looking forward. So I'm going to ask you, Vaun, as a relationship strategist, I'm sure you've seen a lot of people over the years and provided a lot of counseling, not really. I want to say relationship is something that I find that you're very passionate about. And you have a good reason to be passionate about, because I can see you and your wife, but you're going to tell us about that relationship. But oftentimes we hear people on the top. We really don't hear how they got there. But I've always said that it's in the valley that we learn the greatest lesson. So can you pull the curtain back a little bit and tell us how you get to be this relationship strategist? Vaun?
Yes. Well, just a little bit about me. I grew up in the LeClaire Courts, Chicago, LeClaire Courts housing projects in Chicago, just a few blocks down from Chicago's Midway Airport, which is coincidentally where we'll be staying when we go to the conference in April. But as a child, I thought we had a pretty good life. And when you're a child, you typically focus on childish things. And so the larger and more important issues often go right over your head. And so it never once crossed my mind that our living arrangement was less than desirable. My mother and father had gotten divorced. And so my mother and I and my younger brother, we all moved in with my grandparents. And my grandmother and grandfather were great. They helped my mother with me and my little brother. And my mother worked hard. She worked hard. She went to school, and just trying to put us in a better situation. Our neighborhood had been in a steady decline for some years, and as far as quality of life goes, I was too young to notice, of course, but my mother noticed. And I think what might have solidified the decline of our neighborhood in her mind, we had two major events hit us in 1984. The crack cocaine epidemic hit the streets, and my father was murdered. And so I'm 12 years old, and I lose my father. And shortly after that, I think that impact was really strong on my mother. And so she moved us out of those projects to a suburb just outside of Chicago, a small town called Justice. Now I was already having a pretty rough year, losing my father and all, and now we were moving, which meant I had to leave all of my friends and moving to a place where I knew no one. But the silver lining in all of this is that this new town is where I met my wife. And so I met my wife when I was just 12 years old. I met her at the playground with a bunch of friends, a bunch of kids out there just singing some of the old school songs, trying to be grown, And we started dating while I was in high school. And we got married right out of high school, immediately after graduation. And we were very young. but my wife was much more mature than I was. And so I give her a lot, and maybe even most of the credit for us lasting as long as we have in our marriage. We've certainly had our share of challenges, and no relationship is 100% smooth sailing all of the time, but we have a lot more good times than bad times. And so in our 27 years, we've had 4 children, and now we have 4 grandchildren as well. And we are closer today than we've ever been. Now, just moving forward to the relationship strategist idea, I don't claim to be an expert. I don't believe such a thing exists because every single relationship is unique. But I've learned a lot over the course of my 27-year marriage, and I've helped countless couples deal with challenges in their relationships. And so I really enjoy helping couples work toward establishing some sense of harmonic balance in their relationships. And so with that, let's get into it. Whatever questions you have.
All right. Thank you. As you met your wife at 12 years old. Oh my goodness. And you guys still going strong. I cannot believe it. But
Yeah.
I cannot wait to meet your wife in April. So that's for sure. So tell me, in these days, I wasn't born, I was not born in this country. I was born in Nigeria. And when I look at relationship, how it used to be growing up and how it is now, there's definitely a great change. A great change, and I'm sure when you get into your conversation, you can talk about that. The fact that we now have a lot of technologies, now that we have women working, now that we have people moving away and living at different places, it wasn't the way it used to be, has impacted relationship a whole deal. Now that we can get a divorce anytime you want, has really impacted a relationship so much. When I was growing up, and it may be as a culture, when I was growing up, it used to be families and relatives. Whenever there's a problem in a relationship, they will get together and help you resolve it so that you can still stay together. Is it always 100%? Everybody happy? I don't believe that was the case. But I think that's when we have division of labor. Everybody know what their role in a relationship. And in that case, it's a man's job to make sure that the wife and the family are very taken care of. And then it was the woman's, of course, stay home and make sure that the home is taken care of. But now, everything that we used to know in a relationship, or we thought if you grew up in the church that is supposed to be, has changed because things have really changed and we're in a different era now. And as long as I know that seems to affect the relationship, it's easy to get a divorce now. And the divorce rate has really skyrocketed. And individuals involved are paying the price. It's not only affecting one person, it's affecting 2 people, it's affecting the children, and it's affecting the entire society. So what can you share with us? If you can pull the curtain just a little, just let us know. I know you've been working with a lot of people, individuals and couples, and helping them within their relationship. How do you see this, and what can you share with us on the remedies to bring about it?
Repeat the question for me, please. Just the last part, your voice broke up a little bit.
The question is, now that we are in a different era, if you look back how your parents lived and how my parents lived, the way they have their relationship is totally different than what it is now. What impact do you think the way we live now have in the society as far as trying to hold the relationship together?
I think we live in a culture that promotes ideas of individualism and individual happiness and me first more than anything. And I think that our ideas about marriage have changed considerably. I think in the older times, marriage is the foundation of community. And so anywhere that you see communities struggling with dysfunction, high levels of disarray, like children being or single family households, a bunch of teenage pregnancies, a bunch of unwanted or unplanned children, those are examples of relationship dysfunctions, just on a very basic level. And so what we have now are relationships rooted in individual happiness. And so it's easy to abandon those relationships for a lot of people because people's ideas of happiness are skewed, I think. And by that, I mean, we tend, as a society, we tend to look outside of ourselves for happiness, whether it's adornments or what we can buy or what have you. But most people don't realize that happiness is an inside job. And so it's not my job to make my wife happy. It's not her job to make me happy. Our job is to not do things that purposely make each other unhappy. And the rest. And so just moving forward to your question, I think we've lost a lot of what we used to have as far as the importance of what a village means and what it means to actually build a community. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it answers my question. So we're talking about it is not each other to make each other. It's not your responsibility to make the other person happy. When we talk about that, I want to look at the difference between a man and a woman in terms of what does it mean to love. I want to look at the difference because for a woman, I'm a woman, that's obvious. For a woman, most women, what they really look at in terms of love, what I appreciate in terms of love is affection and love, right? It's not about how many cars, on how much money or the wealth of a man. For most women, they interpret the love is love and affection. As I discussed with you, really, it's like a gas has to be put in a car. A car needs a gas.
Right.
A car needs gas. That's the same way women need love and affection. And that's how women thrive in a relationship. When we talk about women will love to hear so many times because they are attracted to what they hear, not what they see. So when you tell a woman, I love you, you can say 100 times. It means something to a woman. You can say the same thing to a man. It doesn't necessarily mean anything to a man, but rather it is about the respect, right? But
right.
The problem is that I see that men and women do not understand each other's love language, and that creates a problem. So what can you share with us about that?
Well, I dropped a love language. I shared a love language test on Facebook, and so much of our ability to get along and communicate on a high level depends on us knowing what the other person needs. And so my wife's love language is, one of the high priorities is gifts. She's just wired that way. And so she needs to receive gifts. And my love language is words of affirmation. And so I don't require her to buy things for me. I just, every now and then, if she just lets me know that she appreciates what I'm doing, as long as I can sense that appreciation, I'm good. She doesn't really have to say a whole lot. But my wife she loves flowers. She loves gifts. If I buy her a charm bracelet, and so, the next woman may not care at all about gifts. Hers may be words of affirmation as opposed to, or like my son-in-law, his love language is, I think it was deeds or acts of service. And so he may not say a whole lot about how he feels. He'll just do things to show how he feels. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answers my question. And so what I'm hearing you saying is that for each couple, they have to determine and learn the other person's love language and how they will appreciate you showing them love.
Yes, and it'll certainly enhance communication. I mean, without that, if you go from one relationship to the next, thinking that you're going to service one boyfriend like you serviced your last boyfriend, unless you get lucky, you're going to run into a lot of communications because we don't all need the same things. That's why I say there's no such thing as a relationship expert, because every combination of male and female, when you get together, every scenario is unique. So every scenario is unique, and we have to be purposeful about learning each other's needs.
Every relationship is different. As I was saying, I come from a different country, and the culture is most definitely different, even though now almost every culture, no matter where the culture is really gravitating towards the culture of the West. And for me, it seems to be infiltrating, and it's infiltrating in the business of marriage, the institution of marriage in specific. But having said that, when couples are unable to understand each other's love language, for the most part, it brings about misunderstanding, which in turn may or may not lead to divorce, because it's not every misunderstanding that leads to divorce. How do you think this impacts the children, if there are any children involved in that relationship?
Are you asking me how I think divorce impacts children?
Yeah. How do you think that, in fact, how do you think that affects the children involved in the relationship?
Well, on some level, I do promote the idea of staying together for the sake of the children, as long as the environment isn't so toxic that that it causes more harm to the child's life than it would otherwise cause if the couple were to split. And so if you can get along and at least coexist, and even operate as cordial or friends, then I think it does more good for the child to have both parents there than harm. But if you're cussing each other out and you're always fighting and yelling and taking out all this extra tension on the child, if the children can feel that tension, then that's too much. And I think the environment does more harm than good. But further to your point, I think children are psychologically harmed by their parents splitting. They're torn often. And I know a couple who, people take a lot of this stuff very personally. These divorces are very hurtful. And so sometimes when the couple split, the child is in the middle, and you'll have one parent that'll badmouth the other parent to the child. And so the child is now split, having to try to choose between the mother and the father, or trying to appease both mother and father. And children are just, they're way too young and unprepared to deal with such a traumatic, it really can be traumatizing. So I think oftentimes these high levels of stress can manifest in poor behavior in children, and they get into all kinds of things as a result of that. Or they can anyway, not always. But my parents divorced, and it was very painful for me to not have my father around. I was one of those young male children that really needed my father there. And so there were things, there's a rap lyric, Jay-Z has this song out, and he says, now the teachers couldn't reach me and my mother couldn't beat me hard enough to match the pain of my pops not seeing me. And that's indicative of how I felt. There was so much pain in me from my father not being there. And I did act out in some ways. But, thankfully I was able to not stray too far off the rails, because my mother is a very, very good mother. And so she was able to kind of keep me from straying too far off the path.
Okay. Wow. So, and he brought up a good point, the absence of father in a home. You and I were talking about it earlier. There's certainly, as a young boy, I believe that a father has a role in a young boy's life. There's certain things a mom cannot give a young boy, but most parents, they do the best they can. They see mothers trying to hold on one, two, three jobs just to make it for the children. But absolutely, I have no doubt that it does impact the child as well. And the same thing goes for the young girls, but especially young boys growing up without their father. I believe that it does have an impact, and where it is necessary, maybe a role model doesn't necessarily have to be a biological father, but biological father will be the best. So I absolutely agree with what you said. So you've been talking to a lot of both individual and couples in their relationship. What do you think, or how do you think they can avoid a relationship hiccup in the first place before even they get married?
Mm.
What will be that thing that will help them so that they don't even have it at all? If they have it, they're able to alleviate it without it causing much harm in their relationship.
Well, before I go into that, I just want to touch back on the point that you just made about the importance of fathers being in the home for primarily for boys. But I also think that it's equally important even for young girls, just from the standpoint that there are so many young girls who don't know what it means to have a platonic relationship with a male who wants nothing from them other than to see them do well. And so you have a lot of young ladies that are growing up and their only interaction with males is an exchange based on some sort of trade or sex.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very unhealthy manner of approaching life. And so I think the nature of the platonic relationship or just having a male in a young lady's life who loves her and wants nothing from her other than to see her do well, that's crucial in the development for a young lady. Just obviously from a different aspect than it is for a young male, but again, like I say, I think it's equally crucial. Moving forward to your next question, I think there's so many reasons that cause hiccups, but I think largely the biggest reason for hiccups is people have, I think people get into relationships for the wrong reasons. And a lot of time, going back to the point in the conversation where we were talking about happiness, so many people get into relationships because they think that another person is supposed to make them happy. And that's not the design of relationships. We're not designed to that's too much burden to put on anybody for them to, or for you to require them to make you happy. It's a very unrealistic expectation. And so getting into relationships for the wrong reasons, that's one. Having a shared vision, or not, should I say, not having a shared vision about what success means. People have very different ideas about what success is. And a lot of times something as simple as definitions can help clear that up. And so for me, like Earl Nightingale has this definition for success. He says, success is the gradual realization of a worthy ideal. And so if we can't see eye to eye on what a worthy ideal is or what the end game looks like for us, then even that from the very beginning, that causes problems. Finances, we need to have at least a common idea on how to handle finances. If your money is your money and my money is your money, that's a problem. You know, we need to at least have some sort of common vision on how to handle money. Intimacy. The Bible says, "Be ye not unequally yoked," right? And now I know that means believers with non-believers, but I think that also relates to relationships. And so let's just talk about, we're going to keep it PG, but let's talk about sex for a minute. If you have one person who has a very high sex drive, and let's say they need it every day. And then you have another person who could care less about sex and maybe they're okay with once a month. You have two people who are very unequally yoked. And no matter how much they love each other, I think they're going to have a hard time sustaining that type of relationship. Another area is inability to resolve conflict. Just something as basic as resolving an argument or dispute without name calling or going so far over the edge where people have to now put their hands on each other. Just resolving conflicts in the most peaceable manner possible. And sometimes that requires training or at least some sort of external influence. So those are a few reasons that relationships fail or minor hiccups to overcome. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it answers my question. I'm going to follow up on that question. And you talked about making each other happy. It is not your responsibility. So how does that really, how would you explain this then? Here you are on one hand, I'm looking for love and affection, and he is looking for respect. But if he doesn't get that, he's not happy and nothing else works in their relationship. And if I don't get that, I'm not happy. So is that part of making me happy or not? Is that part of making him happy, doing it to make him happy or not? What is your opinion on that?
We have some pretty dangerous ideas in Western society that we've internalized. And so we have this saying over here that opposites attract. And I don't believe that. I don't believe opposites attract. I believe complements do. And so when you have this idea that opposites attract, there's a good girl who has to have a bad boy. And we're feeding into this idea as though these things are concrete or absolute. And it's just not how that works. So when I say complementary attraction, I'm talking more of a yin yang type of concept, or a masculine and feminine energy type of concept. And so, for instance, if there are some men who are much softer than other men. And so if you have a very soft male and a very, or I should say a less soft female, then they're going to have some very competing energies. And so that's what I mean by complementary energy. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of making each other happy and men needing respect and women needing love, I think that I think I lost track of your question. One more time for me.
No, I'm saying you talked about it is not your responsibility to make her happy, and it's not her his responsibility to make her happy.
Yes.
So my question is, in order to thrive, there's something that each other needs to thrive in a relationship. And for female, it's love and affection, and for male, it's being recognized, is having that affection, is giving affirmation and supporting the person in what they're doing. So how does that play into, it is not your responsibility to love her, it is not my responsibility to make him happy?
I think for the most part, we don't spend enough time evaluating people before we get into relationships with them. And you could alleviate so much strain and so much stress in these relationships if you get to know a person before you find out that you have a baby on the way, or before you even begin sexual relationships. And I know Steve Harvey caught a lot of flack for this, promoting the idea of women waiting 90 days and so on. But I really do think that that's a good idea, because, and even longer really, I think that oftentimes women grow attached to men a whole lot quicker than men grow attached to women during sexual contact. And so if you find out that you're in love with somebody that you're not compatible with, where do you go from here? So now you have two people trying to fit a square peg into a round hole and trying to make a relationship work that never should have taken place in the first place. And so I think when you so I think that people should be just as thorough in interviewing a potential mate as a bank is before they give out a loan. And I say that tongue in cheek in a sense, but at the same time, there's a lot of reality in what I'm saying, because I just think that we move so fast into relationships. And so now you have somebody that you're trying to be happy with that you're completely incompatible with. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that answers my question. So one thing about relationship that can really bring about hiccup is, can a married couple have opposite friends? Can a man have a friend that is a female, and can a female have a friend that is a male? And how do you see it?
We don't do that. My wife does not have male friends. I do not have female friends. What we have, let me rephrase that. We have some really good friends who are couples. And so, if, I guess a quick way of summarizing that is, if the person is a friend to the relationship, then I guess they can qualify as friends. And so there's no such thing as my wife having some male friend that I barely know, or me having some female that I'm calling my friend that she barely knows. If the person is a friend to the relationship, then I guess they can qualify as a friend. But if there's some, and you have to be honest with yourself and with each other when it comes to that. And so, if there's some sexual chemistry or some undertones going on, if there's a little bit of flirting going on the side, then that's hostile territory, and that person should not be considered a friend. But just in short, we don't have friends of the opposite sex. Men and women are not designed to be friends. There are exceptions. I get it. And I think that those exceptions are just that. They are exceptions to the rule. Boys and girls, once you reach puberty, we are not designed to be your friend.
Wow, you almost sound like my mom growing up. Men are a girl and a boy is not supposed to be. It's not supposed to be friend.
No.
Yeah, I understand. I think sometimes it can threaten the relationship. But my belief is that if one has taken the time, because sometimes you may have someone that has been a very close family friend for either of the couple, that goes back even before, it goes back to the couple's parents. And so that relationship is very strong. But I think what it really takes is an understanding on both sides, knowing that there's nothing attached, but they're a family friend. But I get what you're saying, because that can actually be a threat in a relationship. So I totally see your point on that. And that seems to be one of the hiccups couples have in a relationship. But I also think that before that even happens, I think sometimes there's something that is already going on. They just haven't been able to dictate that something was going on in a relationship in the first place. That's my thought on that. So I'm gonna ask you another question, and this question really has to do with intimacy in a relationship. Again, I'm going back to, before I even say the intimacy in a relationship, talk to us, because women sometimes don't get it, what a man really needs to thrive. And like you said, every man is different, but it's that understanding that really will make a difference in the relationship. What is we call it ego, but it's not really ego. It's who a man is, and I believe that is inherent, is part of being a man, right? How does that, when that ego is bruised, ego in a good way, not in a bad way, when that is bruised in a relationship, how does that impact a relationship?
When the ego is bruised, in what way? What do you mean?
When ego is bruised in a relationship, as far as being disrespectful, as far as not understanding that a man thrives in respect, and that is not, sometimes we may see it as being egotistic, but it's just part of who they are. That's how they feel important, should I say. When that is bruised, how does that impact a relationship?
I think oftentimes when women are unable or unwilling to show respect to their male counterparts, I think oftentimes we see that as a competing type of energy. And I don't want to compete with my woman. There should, just like I'm not trying to compete with her for who's the prettiest. That's her job. That's her role. I don't want any part of that. And I don't need her trying to compete with me for who's the strongest or who's, whatever ideas you might have about masculinity. And so when a woman is unwilling or unable to show respect, you're in the wrong relationship, really. If my wife can't or is unwilling to accept direction from me or unwilling to follow me, and I don't mean blindly follow me. I mean, my wife follows me because I think she's pleased with the level of consistency in when she follows me. She's pleased with the results of what it means to follow me. But I can't lead if I don't have a follower. Mm-hmm. And so I have to consult with her. I mean, I have to be open with her about the direction that we're headed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, I think, bruised egos can heal, but a lot of it is based on intentions. And my wife, for instance, I hope I'm not giving too much information away, but my wife is very headstrong, very, very headstrong, and she's very sensitive. And so if I'm not mindful in how I navigate that, there can be flare-ups. And so I'm careful, or I should say at least mindful. And over the years, I've learned what her trigger points are, and, I navigate accordingly. And so rarely, if I don't think she's, I can't even remember the last time my ego was bruised, if you want to use that term. She's always been pretty respectful to me. So I hope that answers the question.
That answers my question. So what do you think, or what do you say about, I'm going to go there, submissive, a woman being submissive to the man in the relationship? Sometimes we look at being submissive as a bad thing. And I seem to look at it differently, because when a woman submits to a man, it is now for the man, you have a lot of responsibility on you. But sometimes I think we look at it, some women look at it different, as being I'm your servant. But I don't think, in my own viewpoint, that's what that means. So how do you see that?
Exactly how you said it. I mean, we processed that whole submissive idea as if she's supposed to be my servant, and that's not what that means. In many regards, the reason that my wife would be comfortable submitting to me is because she knows that I'm not going to abuse her trust, and so she's comfortable submitting to me for that reason. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time getting any woman who has a healthy, who's psychologically healthy, would not be willing to submit to a man who doesn't have her best interest at heart. And again, by submit, that doesn't mean I own you, or, it means that I'm willing or in service to you just as much as you are to me. It's just that my service to her is going to be different from her service to me. But truthfully, we're in service to each other.
Awesome. I love that. That's what I believe too. But, depending on each person, everybody has their own viewpoint. But thanks for answering that question. So now we're coming to the end, because we can go on and on and on. I'm sure the audience has question to ask you. So I'm going to move right along and find out if you have anything else that you will want the audience to take away. So if somebody is going through a relationship hiccup right now, what are 3 things that you can give them for them to hold on to?
They estimate that about 90% of people's overall happiness is based on how well they fare in their intimate relationships. And so one of the ideas that I like to relay, we often take each other for granted after we've been together for so long or for a period of time. But one of the main things that couples can do is to become a student again of the person that you're in a relationship with. I'm going to say that again. You have to become and remain a student. You have to be interested in that person. But the other part of that is the other person or both people, your job is to remain interesting. You can't become a boring person. Nobody likes watching paint dry. Right? So you have to become and remain interested in the person that you're in a relationship. That's in relationship with. That's number one. The second idea is you have to be purposeful about the time that you spend together. And that's intimate time. And that may vary depending on what your schedule is. Some people, if you're a flight attendant or something, you may only see each other 2 or 3 times a week. And so your time is whatever your time is, whatever your schedule allows. But you have to be purposeful in spending time together. And so that might mean taking walks. That might mean Netflix and chill. You don't have to spend a lot of money. It doesn't have to be a lot of time. It's just based on what your relationship allows for. But the key is to be purposeful. My wife and I, we exercise together. Sometimes we, if there's a book that we're interested in, we'll take turns reading a page. It's her turn to read, and it's my turn to read. And so we read together. You have to do what suits you. I have a third would be variety. You have to maintain some sort of variety in your relationship. Variety is the spice of life. And so you can do different things like cooking together, or you can try new foods together. Be spontaneous and take a trip, even if it's just a road trip. I mean, I'm an hour and a half away from Charleston. And so on any given weekend, I might say, hey, let's just take a ride and see what's going on in Charleston. Even if all we do is drive up there and walk on their little, downtown area, just something new and something different that we can do to break up the monotony. Be adventurous in the bedroom. I don't want to get too, I want to keep it rated G. But, try new things. You can't just do the same old thing over and over again. It gets old.
Okay.
And last, I'll say one of the main things that we have trouble doing is communicating. And so I like to say, seek first to understand, and then last or second to be understood. Seek first to understand, and second to be understood.
All right. Thank you very much. And I know that you and I can go on and go on, but I'll be sure to bring you back. And I hope I can bring you back to continue this conversation. So as we come to the end of this conversation, I just want to ask you, do you have anything that you would like our audience to take part in? How can they contact you?
For your audience, I'd like to give a complimentary or a free 30-minute counseling session, or consultation, coaching session, or strategy session on their relationship. I'm giving that away 30 minutes free. And I can be reached at conditionsoflove@gmail.com. conditionsoflove@gmail.com. You can also reach me on Facebook at Vaun Jackson. That's VAUN, Victor Alpha Uniform November, Vaun Jackson. That's on Facebook. And I forget what my YouTube page is, but you can find me on there.
Audience, you heard Vaun Jackson. Vaun, thank you so much. You dropped up a lot of nuggets, and I can't wait to continue this conversation with you next time. And I'm sure the audience will contact you to take advantage of you. And thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate the time. And at this time, I am going to have the audience ask some question if I can get this in.